Good afternoon and welcome to the Asian Midday Market Watch. Our guest today is David Koh, founder of the Smart Investor in Singapore. David, as always, thank you for coming on the show.
Selamat tengah hari, Mr. Fernandez. How are you?
I'm good, thank you very much. Now, David, before I get your insights, let's take a quick look around the region and see how markets are performing. But before that, we're going to take a look at the crypto markets. So we've got Bitcoin, which is now at 33,851. So it's recovered quite a bit. From the last time you spoke, David, Bitcoin was actually at 40,000. And then it corrected, and it's now back up at just under 34,000. It's up 2.49%. Ethereum is just above the 2,000 level at 2004.22. It's up 1.85%. Looking at markets around the region, we'll start with your neck of the woods. The Straits Times Index is at 3,126.75. It's up 0.56%. The FBM KLCI in Malaysia is at 1,568.49. It's down 0.35%. Across the region, we've got the Nikkei, which is pretty flat at 0.05% up at 28,898. The Shanghai Composite is at 3,573. It's up 0.46%. The Hang Seng is at 28,721.85. It's up 1.46%. And rounding up the numbers, we've got the ASX 200, which is down 0.37% at 7,314.7. Now, David, what's your view on market performance this morning?
I think the market is very confused, Brian. The market just doesn't really understand what is going on. You know, whenever I do a presentation, whenever I do a symposium, and I'm talking to people in a live audience as opposed to virtually at the moment, you look around the audience, you say something, and people will either shake their heads and go, no, I disagree with you, David, or people will be nodding frantically and sort of saying, yeah, I totally agree with what you say. Some people just fall asleep, that's okay. But the people that I'm most worried about are the ones that look very confused because they don't understand what you're saying. And I think that is what is happening in the market now. There are people out there who are saying, I see with my own eyes inflation that is going on. And yet I hear from Jerome Powell, the Fed chair, telling me, it's nothing to worry about, guys. It's okay. It's just a passing phase. And they're very confused. And it is that confusion that is causing, I think, what you're seeing in the market at the moment, this rippling effect in the market. One moment they say, okay, I get what he says, and then they jump in and buy. Next moment they go, oh, look at my Tree Quay, that's gone up in price at the moment. So there is inflation in the system. So it's the confusion that I think that has not been addressed by central bankers.
But so here's the thing, on the flip side of the equation, you talk about people listening and balking at everything that Jerome Powell says. Then you have Warren Buffett, who famously once said, if the Fed chair were to whisper to me that what his monetary policy is going to be over the next 2 years, it wouldn't change a thing that I do. So you have the other end of the spectrum.
Oh, I agree with you. And I think all of us should not really base our investing decisions on what the Fed chair is going to do. We have to take things into our own hands now. And we have to look at the market and we have to decide for ourselves, is there or is there not inflation? And is this inflation going to be persistent? As far as I'm concerned, Brian, there is always inflation in the system. Whether it is 2%, whether it is 4% or 6%, there is inflation in the system. So when we are looking at companies that we want to invest in, we have to sort of bear that in mind and say, does this company have pricing power? Is it able to increase prices whenever it wants? Warren Buffett also said something else, and he said, you want to avoid those companies where if they have to raise prices by 10%, they have to hold a prayer meeting first. And I think what he's And I think what he's saying is that you want to avoid those companies that are price takers. In other words, those companies that have no choice. If everybody cuts their prices by 10%, you have to cut it. You cannot raise yours by 10%. And I think that is really the secret to investing, looking for companies that have that magical quality called pricing power.
Okay, I'm going to give you share an example of a price taker. and we talk about the Rio Tintos and the BHP of this world. They are price takers. They can't influence commodity markets at all. But David, you mentioned in your article in the Smart Investor about companies on the SGX, on the Straits Times Index that actually have some element of pricing power. Among those 30 companies, could you share some of those companies that you think have a degree of pricing power?
Okay, first of all, I'll tell you the ones that don't have pricing power, and airlines are one. Airlines don't have pricing power because they are so dependent on what is going on within the industry. There are substitutes. You try and raise prices and there is some low-cost carrier out there who's going to undercut you. So that's a good example of a company that does not have great pricing power. It will surprise you that when I looked at the Straits Times Index, the group of companies that have got pricing power are real estate investment trusts. They have pricing power. And
that's interesting. Okay.
Well, yeah. And I scratched my head a little and I thought, do they really? Because everybody tells me that office space and retail space are a commodity, but it's not. If you own a shopping center along Singapore's Orchard Road, the main shopping belt, let's forget about the pandemic for now. Let's forget about COVID-19, which is stopping tourists from coming into Singapore. But if you have a shopping center, if you own a shopping center, such as Plaza Singapura, which is owned by CICT, and you are a shopkeeper and you want to be in Orchard Road, you don't dictate to CICT or Plaza Singapura how much you're going to pay in terms of rent. They tell you what the rent is going to be. If you are a company like Keppel REIT that owns office space within the CBD, and CICT also owns office space within the CBD, they can decide what the rent is. They will say, you want to be on this road, you're going to have to pay this kind of rent. And so surprisingly, REITs have pricing power, particularly those that have location. And we go back to probably your favorite phrase, location, location, location. If you have the right location, you can decide what the rent is going to be. Sure, there might be some fluctuations every now and again based on supply and demand, but ultimately, if you are in the prime area, such as Hong Kong land that is in prime area in Hong Kong, you dictate the rent, not the tenant.
Now, besides the REIT, on the Singapore Straits Times Index, what other stocks have an element of pricing power?
Okay, another one was something like Singapore Technology, ST Engineering, Singapore Technologies Engineering. I mean, they're in the defense industry and they have pricing power. You want to buy defense equipment, they tell you what the price is going to be. You don't go and argue about, how much do I want to pay for a armored personnel vehicle or something. You don't decide that. They decide that. They will tell you this is the price you're going to pay. You want to buy it? This is the price. If you want to buy more, okay, I'll give you a discount, but ultimately they have pricing power. So things in the defense industry certainly do have pricing power. But I go back again and I reiterate the REITs. People are very concerned about REITs and they say, oh, is it sustainable at the moment with the pandemic? Forget about the pandemic because the pandemic will end at some point. Maybe in some countries like Singapore, it'll end sooner than where you are at the moment. In Malaysia, it'll end a bit later, but it will end, Brian. It will end. And then those companies that are in good locations, and if we have a look at the Kuala Lumpur Composite Index, KLCC, I think it's got a prime location. You want to be in KLCC, you're going to have to pay those kind of rents.
Now, David, as always, thank you very much for your sagely advice.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Now, we've been speaking to David Kuo, the founder of the Smart Investor in Singapore, on BizTech's Asian Midday Market Watch. I'm Brian Fernandez. Check out www.biztech.asia for business and technology conversations. Please subscribe and like our Facebook and LinkedIn platforms as well. Thank you very much for tuning in.